Well, hi everyone, and thank you for being here. It's Conversations with Women Like Me. I'm Julie Fairhurst, and I'm the founder of the book program Women Like Me. We now have I don't even know exactly. I think we're heading up to about 18 books. We've got over 100 writers now. I think we've got about 122 writers now. It's very exciting. And today we are here with Brooke O'Connor, and she is a writer in our very next book, which is being released within the next day or two, and it is called Women Like Me, Reclaiming Our Power. So thank you so much for being here, Brooke.
Oh, thank you, Julie. I really appreciate you inviting me.
Good. Start off by just reading a little bit of Brooke's bio so you can get a little bit of a feel about who she is, and then we're going to jump right into discussing her story and why she decided that she wanted to write it. So Brooke's story is called The Golden Years. Forgiveness Isn't Pretty. Brooke is a proud mother, wife, and world traveler. Now, Brooke is from the United States, but she is currently enjoying her life in Oaxaca.
Watuko.
Watuco, but you got the Oaxaca.
Oaxaca. That's the state
Oaxaca,
of
Oaxaca.
Oaxaca.
I look at it, I'm like, what is that? So Oaxaca, and you're living in the little town of Santa Maria.
Santa Maria Roltuco.
I
Yeah.
want to go. Yes, love it. I love it. I've been
Mm.
there four times I've been to Huachuca. I love it. And so she is living there full time, and she is writing her memoirs there. So what a great place to write your memoir. She has spent 20 plus years in the coaching industry, and she's now helping other coaches develop their businesses with a blend of authenticity and technology. If you would like to talk to Brooke about any speaking engagements, coaching developments, or tacos, you can find her on Facebook. And at the end of this, we're going to have all of Brooke's links to how to get a hold of her and her bio in there, and so that everybody knows how to find her. And tacos. Now you're making me hungry. So let's get started, Brooke. So why don't you just give us a little bit of an idea? What was it that made you want to write your story in the book?
That's a good question, Julie. I wanted to write the story because I think that there's a lot of talk in the media now around trauma. And we talk about trauma, but we don't really talk about how to resolve it in a positive, forward moving way. And of course, the first thing you have to do is understand that you've had trauma. But the next thing you have to do is figure out what's going to be the best way for you to resolve that. And for me, it was working with the biggest trauma that I had in my life, which was growing up with my mother. And I felt like if I wrote that story, maybe there would be other women who are going through similar things who would understand that and who would be able to get some hope that you don't just have to be traumatized and hurt and never get over that, never move on from that. So that was the point.
Right. And how was it when you were writing it then? Were you like, did you find it easy to write, or what was your experience during that?
You know, I'm in the middle of writing my memoir, so a lot of memories that were traumatic, a lot of difficult things. There was a lot of abuse and a lot of all kinds of all those negative things, and so I didn't think it was going to be so hard to write this chapter because I've already dealt with all of this. But really dealing with this particular moment in time was much more emotional than I thought it would be.
Hmm.
I had not really gotten into my subconscious mind of what was going on with me during that time until I started writing this and realizing that I learned a lot more from the experience than I thought.
Oh,
And I
good.
healed a lot more from the experience than I thought.
That's wonderful. That's, that's the goal of the books. It's to help the writer, just exactly what you explained, but then also to help the readers, because there's going to be people who read your story who can relate in some way, and hopefully get some encouragement from your story, and then lessons as well on how to deal with things in their life. I think that unfortunately, I think that your story is a common thing out there, unfortunately. So, well, why don't you start by telling us a little bit? So you were your mom got sick. Your mom was ill, right?
Yeah, so my mom was very much a loner. She was very independent and has been forever. And she had a house up on the side of the mountain with a piece of property, and it was her and her animals, and that's all she needed ever. And we did not have a close relationship for my whole life, but even in my adult life, we did not have a close relationship. And so it wasn't very common for her to call me. And when she started calling me, I thought maybe she was more interested in me. I thought maybe age was tempering her and she was becoming, she wanted to be a little bit more connected and all that. But that is not the case. It turned out that she was getting dementia. And the dementia did change her personality. And that was the first sign that I got, was for the first time in my life, she was actually calling me for things, whereas I would normally call her.
Right. And do
So,
you want to tell us about the parking lot? That was sort of about wasn't that like the first real sign
yeah.
where you were like, uh-oh, something's up here?
Yeah. So normally how our relationship went was every couple months or so, I would call her, check in. She would, have maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes at the most, because she was always very busy. The cats had to be fed, or the horse had to have this, or I got to go do this, or, there was always something. But then one weekend she called me and she sounded really frantic, and she was in the parking lot of Best Buy. Now, first of all, she's never called me when she wasn't at home. I mean, she's only called me maybe a half a dozen times in my entire life. So for her to call me from the parking lot of Best Buy was just a shock. And she was frantic and she was flustered and she didn't know what to do. And she was reaching out to me to ask for help. Her modem had gone down, it had broken, and she called up the provider, the internet provider, and they said, well, you just got to get a new modem. And so she went to go get one, but it was such a difficult thing for her to do, not because she couldn't normally do that, because she was very independent. Anything that was broken, Julie, she would just go fix it. If she didn't know how to fix it, she'd go to the library, she'd get schematics. I mean, this is a woman that's like, she was doing everything. So for her to get flustered in the middle of the parking lot and not know what to do because Best Buy didn't have the exact model that she was looking for of a new modem, it was like a red flag to me. There was something going on. But the worst part was the next day, I knew she wouldn't call me back when I said to call me back that evening, because she never called me back. But the next day I called just to check, see what was going on. And she didn't remember the conversation we'd had.
Oh.
She didn't remember at all. So she went through this whole diatribe of what she had to do with the modem, and she had to go this place and she had to go that place. And on that phone call, not only the original phone call the day before, not only had we talked about all of that, but I told her where to go to get a new modem. And she'd forgotten all of it. Forgot just completely. It wasn't there.
Wow. It's pretty scary when you've got somebody as independent as your mom. Yeah, who just goes out and does things and takes care of herself, and that's that. Wow.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. She'd have heart problems and go to the hospital and things like that, and never even tell me
Oh,
that she had an issue. It would be like maybe a year later. Oh yeah, I got to take my heart pill. What are you talking about, heart pill?
yeah. Yeah.
She
Why
just,
do you think she was like that? Was she like that? Because it sounds when you're describing her that she's distant.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Why
So
was she like that as when you were a child?
You know, so my mom was very abusive.
Mm,
And what I have found, especially, through all of the coaching experience that I had, is that people who are abusive, most of the time underneath, there's the anger that's on top, right? So there's the
yes.
abusive anger that happens.
Yeah.
But most of the time underneath, the anger comes from fear. And with my mother, the fear was because when she was growing up, she was very alone. So her family, they were immigrants to the States. Her mother was from Austria. Her father was from Germany.
Mm,
This was right after the war. They moved to a hill in a very poor part of Los Angeles, and she grew up in an area where, being this little Germanic girl, she was the minority. So she was going to school, and there were the Latina girls who would take all her lunch money, and they would, she started carrying a knife with her to school, and, this kind of thing, right? And she was also very overweight her whole life, because how she dealt with all that stress was to eat. So
uh,
she just would eat and eat. And so she was overweight, and people would make fun of her. And so from a young age, she was in fear, and she felt less than.
mhm,
And her way of coping with all that was to become super independent, super capable,
mhm,
super everything. And no one was going to get in her way.
mhm.
So,
Which is a
yeah.
which is partially a not a bad coping mechanism for that, but on the other hand, though, she lacked certainly love and personal relationships because of her fear. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see, so that's the other side of it, is that when you live with that kind of fear, then you don't allow anyone in.
Right. Yes.
And the one time that she did allow someone in was when she met my father. And back in the day, back in the 60s, you could just get speed from the doctor if you needed to lose weight. So, she was taking amphetamines when she was 19 years old. She got really thin. She was, really beautiful. She moved out of the house for the first time, moved in with her girlfriend. And my dad was actually dating the girlfriend, but the girlfriend wasn't interested in him.
Oh.
And so my mom kind of stepped into that gap, and he got drunk one night and proposed, and she was like, taking it. I'm taking that right now. And so fast forward, because she had all of those insecurities, it wasn't a good marriage. And
Right.
by the time that they had adopted me and my brother, and I was 7 years old, my parents divorced.
Ah, yes.
And when they divorced, that was like the nail in the coffin for my mom, because here's the one person she'd opened up to, right? The
Right.
one person that she let see her, that
Yes.
she connected with,
Yeah.
and now he's rejecting her.
Oh.
And she never dated. I guess I heard that she did date maybe once, but growing up, I never saw her date. She always said it was our fault. She didn't want to bring men into our house, but that it was more her fear. She was
Yes.
never going to let anyone get close to her again. And that's why she had all the animals,
Right.
because, as she said, animals just love you unconditionally. They don't hurt you.
Mm.
They don't lie to you. They don't do things behind your back.
That
So,
makes so much sense. I never even connected that. But now
mm,
that you've said that, that just makes absolute sense because yeah, animals, they don't care what you look like or just feed me and love me.
yep, that's it. That's
That's
it.
all
And
I
even if,
want.
yeah. And even if you
Yeah,
get angry at a dog or a cat or something, and 15 minutes later, they're right back
that's right.
giving you love,
Yeah. Wow.
versus people, which are much harder to deal with.
So what happened then when you just realized that your mom was having some issues?
Mm.
I think you went to visit.
I did. So my mom only had really one friend that kept up with her. This woman, I mean, she's just one of those salt of the earth people. She's, everyone deserves to have a friend like Lois. She just She's one of those people that always reaches out, always checks on people. She always sends the birthday card, the Christmas card, one of those kind of people, just really just good-hearted people. And she just never let down with my mom. Even with my mom being as independent as she was, Lois just always kept track of her and always was, just keeping an eye out for her. So unbeknownst to me, Lois had been encouraging her for a while to go get an MRI. And so after I got off the phone with mom, I called Lois, and Lois told me that there was going to be an MRI the next week, told me the whole story of what was going on. And I said, okay, I'm going to fly out there, because it was really concerning to me. And I had no idea about dementia. I had no idea what it could be. Is this just getting old? Is it, like what is really happening? And I knew that my mom had already had heart problems. And so I just needed to know what was going to happen. Because although we didn't have a close relationship, the results of growing up like that is I'm very empathic. Right. So that's what happens a lot of times with people who were abused, is that they become extra sensitive and extra attentive to other people. And I was aware of that, but I wanted to do that. I just needed to know what was going to happen. I needed to know what the doctor was going to say.
And so you ended up going to the doctor with her then?
I did, yeah. Obviously you can imagine somebody as independent as my mom. I've never been to the doctor with her. She wouldn't even go to the doctor with me when I was young. Most of the time I'd go by myself on the bus,
Yeah.
But yeah, I went to the doctor because I knew she wouldn't remember, or she wouldn't tell me everything the doctor said.
Right.
And the doctor was very clear. And it was a good thing that I was there, because even the next day, mom didn't really understand what the doctor had said. Like it was, one day on, it was just enough that she could have reframed it into something else, rather than understanding that she was going to need help.
So so you have a spouse, and you contacted your spouse and said, guess what, hun? I think we're moving.
Yeah. So this was kind of hard because, he had a job that he liked, and we'd been living in Denver, and his family was there, and, he had no intention of moving to Utah. I had no intention of moving back to Utah. I never wanted to go back to where I grew up. But after talking with the doctor and then doing a little bit of research and understanding how dementia develops, I knew that if my mom stayed out there in that big piece of property on the side of the mountain, something really bad was going to happen. And when I say something really bad is going to happen, death for me is not a bad thing. Like that's going to happen to everybody, right? Like it's going to happen one day or another. The worst thing though would be for the dang horse to trample her, and her sitting there for 3 days on the ground in agony, because no one ever checks on her physically, because she's not attached to anyone that way.
Right.
Or falling in the house, or, like I could imagine all these different things that could happen because she wasn't able to really take care of herself. So I called my husband and I said that I needed to come and help mom. And I really didn't know. I had like a 50-50 chance idea that he would want to come or not, honestly. But it was so important to me to do this. And I just felt like he was either going to understand or he wasn't. And it was just something that I needed to do. It was a conclusion of my story. It was a healing part of my story.
Right.
Because I realized as I was watching her through the doctor's appointment, and in these days that I was visiting her, I was watching this woman who was, she was affectionately called a battle axe.
Oh. Oh, no.
Like that's how they just, that's how people would describe my mom. And they would just say, oh, that's just Rosemary. Oh, that's just, but I saw this woman change from that to frail, not able to make decisions, not really being clear, not remembering something we just said an hour ago, having to, repeat things that she was never like that.
No.
She has 2 degrees.
Yeah.
She's a very smart woman.
How long did it take then? Because it seems from your story that the dementia took over quite quickly.
Yeah, so there's different kinds of dementia. People don't realize this. And this is where an MRI is really important, and going to the doctor, so not just saying, oh, well, I think grandma has dementia.
Right.
So the kind of dementia that she had is called vascular dementia. And that's different than Alzheimer's. So somebody with Alzheimer's, they can live for 10, 12, 15, 20 years with Alzheimer's, and they just get progressively worse. And you can watch an Alzheimer's patient go from this level to this level to this level. Like, it's really predictable to see like how they will progress. People with vascular dementia are different. So how the doctor explained it to me is this. It's like having mini strokes in your brain, but the strokes aren't in one place. It's like buckshot. And you don't know when these little mini strokes happen where the buckshot's going to land. So every person who has vascular dementia has different cognitive issues at different times. And instead of watching a gradual decline, the decline will come in giant steps. So from the time that vascular dementia starts to the time that someone is likely to pass is no more than 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So knowing my mom, knowing this was probably going on at least for a year before
Yeah.
anybody noticed or, or anything like that, I knew that she didn't have at the most 4 years left.
Mhm.
And in reality, it was about a year and a half.
Wow. Wow. So do you want to tell us then a little bit about, how it got towards the end with you caring for her?
Yeah, so I consider myself really blessed in this whole story, because the experience that most caretakers have with dementia patients is that the worse the dementia gets, the more ornery and mean and difficult the person becomes to deal with.
Right.
So whatever it was that happened with the dementia with my mom, it was the exact opposite. So as her dementia got worse, and as like in the morning you'd come and you'd see she was a different person, that different person became progressively nicer, easier to deal with. She became more childlike, but childlike in a playful way.
Mhm.
We started laughing and we would do funny things, and she had like her little things that she liked to do. There's a little gas station on the corner that we would always stop at to get her Slurpee that she liked before we went to the doctor, and they'd have a certain kind of donut that she liked. It was really much like having an outing with your fun little niece or something.
Right.
And so I was really blessed that way. I mean, there was still the constant repeating of information. There were processes we had to create. We had a calendar on her counter, and at least 3 times a day we went over the entire calendar for the month of what was going to happen and what appointments we have, and who was coming to do this work, or so there was a lot of that, but it was easier to deal with her because she wasn't as difficult. Towards the end, it became even more difficult because, again, now I look at it and I feel very blessed. Her steps down with the dementia were very large, and the steps became progressively closer together and larger.
Okay.
And that might sound bad when I say, well, that was a blessing, but it was, because the period of time where she had any kind of quality of life to the time that she died was shortened because of that.
Right.
The unfortunate thing was I didn't know that's what was happening. because when we called in hospice to get help, I was under the impression that we'd have hospice for months, and it was actually 10 days.
Yeah,
And
I'm
every day that went by,
reading that, Brooke, in your story, and I remember wondering why it was a short period of time.
every day seemed like a month to me because so many things would happen. It was crazy. It
Mhm.
was crazy. In that 10-day period, we had the paramedics out there twice. She had to get staples in her head because she had fallen and cracked her head open. Um, it was just every day there was something. Every day, and usually not just one thing, but a couple of things. So I had to very quickly move in there, and I had to put a mattress in her living room, which was next to the bedroom, because I had to be able to hear her moving. She was like a Houdini with trying to get out of bed. We'd gotten, all the different things to lock she could get out of all of them. It was incredible. It was
Mm.
incredible.
Aw,
Yeah.
yeah,
So the last 10 days were the hardest.
yeah.
And it was very stressful while I was going through it, but looking back, I realized it was a huge blessing.
Yes, of course. Yes.
You know, it,
She didn't linger for so many years. And as you say, with regular Alzheimer's patients, they can live and live and live, and it's not
yes.
necessarily the best quality of life that they're having, or best for
Yes.
their families either,
Yeah.
depending
Yeah.
on what stage they're at. Yeah.
Yeah. And a big turning point for that. And I think this has to do with her personality and why she decided to go like even quicker, is that when she got to the point where she couldn't go to the bathroom,
Mm.
that was very difficult. The idea of having to have, adult diapers on and having someone wash her and take care of her private parts. She didn't even go to the gynecologist. Like, no one was going to touch her down there. No one was going to look
Yeah.
at her. She was, it was like, she just was, that was not going to happen. And so when we got to that stage where,
Mm.
the adult diapers had to come, that was also for me, that was my limit. I
Yeah.
could do all these things for my mom,
Yeah.
but then knowing how she was about that and knowing how private she was, and I just couldn't do it.
No.
I couldn't do it. And I've always considered myself a very compassionate person. And that was the first time where I realized that this is it. This is my limit. This is the hard stop. I cannot change my mother's diapers.
Mhm.
And I was a little disappointed in myself that I couldn't go through that, because I've changed other people's diapers before. I've helped with other people, adults, elderly that have had that issue, but I couldn't do that with my mother.
Mm.
And I felt a little bad, but at the same time, I thought, you know what? That's what you pay nurses for. That's what you pay home health care for. Let me pay someone.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult, but I called everywhere to try and find someone who could come in and do that. And in the end, she ended up passing the next day, so I didn't have to do that really.
Right.
But that was interesting. That was interesting to realize that was it. That was the wall for me.
Yeah, well, we all have limits, and and I think that it's good that you recognized your limit, because we still need to care for ourselves, and stay within our keep our mental capacity at a positive, the best we can, especially with dealing with something that you were dealing with, and you were there day in and day out, and that alone is because I know with my mother, she had a bit of dementia when she passed, but and when you were talking about that childlike, she was like that. She's like, I don't know how to work the remote,
Yeah. Yeah.
those kinds of things, right? And but I had a lot of family, so we all took our turns, so we weren't necessarily one person being the sole caregiver and arranging and doing all of those things. So personally, I don't know if I could have done that. It's
Well, the thing is, Jilly, when there is no one else,
right.
you figure out a way. Unfortunately, I had my husband who was supporting me the whole way.
Yeah.
And, he was doing all the things that needed to be done apart from taking care of mom.
Right.
He would go to the grocery store. He was doing everything that didn't involve her. And even, in the last days when it was helping her get in and out of the wheelchair or whatever,
Yeah.
he was helping with that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, you figure it out.
Yeah.
That's one of the things. If
Yeah.
you don't have other people, you figure it out, or you pay somebody to do it.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So how are things now for you? When did your mom pass? What year was that?
Oh gosh. So it's interesting because it was a trauma for me, and my trauma response through my whole life has been, I don't really remember dates of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
It took a long time for me to reconstruct like my entire childhood, and then I had to reconstruct like from 19 to 30.
Yeah.
So it's been gosh, how long has it been? It's been about 2 years, I
Okay.
guess, at this point.
And
Yeah.
I'm curious to ask you, because of course I've read, you're just touching on some main points here, but there's much more to your story when somebody reads it. It's a lot more in
Mhm.
depth. But I'm just curious, and this I think is, where maybe you could offer a little bit of advice to anybody who's going through. I mean, there's so many, the baby boomers, right? They're all up there. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yep.
Like, did you find then, because you obviously had some turbulence growing up and some issues, relationship issues with your mom. So did you find taking care of her in that way, like, there was no, did you find that as a healing?
Yes. And that may sound weird. And a lot of people said to me, well, I don't know how you could do that after how she treated you and after everything you went through and blah, blah, blah. Um, but healing is something that you do inside.
Right.
And I needed to be a better person to her than she was to me. I needed that for myself. Now, maybe that might not be what everyone needs.
Right.
I had gotten to the point before this of realizing that my mother was actually just a human.
Mhm.
And, we idealize our parents until we grow up enough to realize that they were just broken human beings doing the best that they could with the tools that they had.
Right.
And once I realized that her tools were like one of those little mini toolboxes you get at the gas station, you know,
Yeah.
she couldn't have done better than what she did.
Yes.
And her way of dealing with life, I didn't want that to go on with my kids,
Yeah.
but that's all she could do.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of really good things that I learned from growing up in an abusive household. I learned how to work. I learned how to be independent. I learned how to figure stuff out for myself, because that was usually the answer. How do you do this, Mom? Figure it out.
Yeah.
So, I learned how to, there were a lot of skills that came along with that.
Yeah.
So by the time Mom got sick, it wasn't like I was still in that bitter, angry place.
Right.
I had already done some healing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the choice that I made is going to be the best choice for everyone.
Right.
But I can tell you that if you've done some work on yourself and then you have the opportunity to be of service, because that's really what it was, right?
Yeah.
And I was in a position financially, my kids were grown, we weren't really tied to any kind of place for anything. So I was in the position that I could do that.
Mhm.
And it just seemed, for me, it was the right thing to do. I needed to give that mercy. I needed to give that kindness.
Mhm.
And that's how it started. But then watching my mom become so much more childlike, and then learning a lot of the things that I learned about her childhood during that period of time, it made me realize even more how much of a human she was, how
Right.
she had been abused, how, the one of her mother's friends who had a car, because not everybody had cars there, and then would pick her up and molest her in the car, to take her home. Like all of these things that people don't of that generation never talked about,
Right.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And so that was healing for me to it was like just reinforcing all the healing I had already done.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that, we're born, you see those beautiful, nice smelling new babies, right? And they're perfect. They
Yeah.
don't have any judgments, they have nothing. They're just this blank canvas that we get to work with. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, most of us screw it up because we have our own issues that we haven't dealt with. And what you just said, I thought was perfect, because that's so true. That generation, so your mom's generation, my mom's generation, they didn't talk about stuff. Nothing.
No.
They no, you had to dig it out of them to find out that there was ever any issues. But when you realize that, it does exactly what you said. It puts them in a place of just being human. They're just human. And now we are just human. But I think
Mhm.
our society, our generation, I should say, is a bit more open. And so when we realize we have an issue, we search for, most of us, I think, are out there searching, how can I be a better person? How can I stop that? Like for me, that was a big thing. How do I stop this generational crap that's going through and through and through, from my grandparents to my parents to me to my kids and now grandkids? How do I stop that? And I figured it out, thank goodness. And so my kids have a much better life than I did or any of our past generations. And now my grandkids, I can see my kids are way better parents than I was. They're just, and so that's for me, right? But that again, that, and no excuse, because people, of course, there's no excuse for bad behavior. But however, I don't think the help was there, right? It was,
No,
it was
no.
like you just live in silence. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the boomer generation was a generation of, they get a lot of flack because they've ruined everything, right? Well, the reality is that they went through a lot of trauma.
Mhm.
They went through a lot of trauma, but they had no resources to help them other than pick yourself up by the bootstraps and get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. No, you're
That was it. And you either crash and burn or you make something of yourself. And a lot of them, because their parents, were from the wartime,
yeah.
their parents just said, you better work, you got to work. And so
Yeah.
that's what they did. They worked hard, they built stuff. And to the detriment of us, this generation, what are we called? We're Gen X, and the Gen X people, we grew up with like nothing. There
Yes.
was nothing. There was, our parents were out working, doing their thing, and we
Yeah.
just grew up with nothing. And so that's why our kids are the way that they are, because we
Yes.
wanted to give them more than nothing. So just like you, I wanted my kids to not carry on the trauma of the family line.
Yeah.
And, my kids, I'm happy to say, are thriving and doing really well with their lives. I've actually had to work on a little bit of jealousy that I have with my daughter, because, she in her mid 20s is doing better than I was doing in my 30s. Like she's just so good.
Yeah.
She's so good. She knows how to make choices. She's made all the right choices. She's doing all the right things. And I'm just so proud of my kids, and
And that's just
and
such
and I'm just so happy.
yeah, but that's just such a credit to you, right? Like this is why I started Women Like Me. This is the exact reason right here. This pivoted conversation, because I want this to stop. All this stuff that we just carry on, let's just stop it, people. And so I just honor you and I credit you for, even if you're a little jealous of her, that's okay, but for you not dwelling, and by going and taking care of your mom, you could have very easily said, well, too bad, lady, guess you should have been, blah
Yeah.
blah blah, but you didn't. And you stood up and you did what a the word I'm looking for, a responsible and caring person would do, and your kids see that, right? And so
Yes.
now they learn that. Like it's all like, what if you said, oh no, forget it, I'm not going to do it, blah, 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 blah. And then one day you need help. And now your kids saw you reacting that way with your mother. And they're like, well, sorry, mom, we're way too busy to help you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, I just, anyway, I got excited there for a second because that's my thing.
Yeah. It is. It's important. It's
Yeah.
important. And in a culture now where values are all relative to whatever you decide that they are,
Yeah.
we've lost the concept of taking care of people.
Mhm.
I'm going to share a story with you that you don't know. It wasn't in my story, but somebody that I learned this with was my ex-father-in-law, because I was married before. So my ex-father-in-law, he lost his wife when they were very young. They were in their 30s. But her mother, right? So his mother-in-law, she had been widowed for quite a while, and he took care of her. He took care of her until she died. This woman blamed him every day of her life about her daughter's death. She had gotten hepatitis and died. That was not his fault. But this woman was so bitter and angry and took it out on him every single day of his life. And he dutifully took care of her, probably because just in memory of his wife and feeling responsible for her. Were there other family members that could have done it? Yeah, maybe. But that man did everything that that woman needed. She died. She was almost 100 years old when she died.
Oh.
And he made sure she was taken care of every single day of it. And I remember the day that she died, and they went to take her body. And I saw this man who was so stoic and so he was just a person who always did the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw him crying. And I could tell that the crying that he was doing, yes, it was sadness that she had passed, because that's normal. But I could also feel that it was the relief of a job well done.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I got shivers.
That he had done the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that stuck with me.
Yes.
That really stuck with me.
Yeah.
Because no one would have faulted him to just drop that mother-in-law the way that she treated him.
Yeah.
But he was an example to all of us.
Yeah.
And I thought about that with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
There was no one that was going to step in and take care of my mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was no one.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. That's what a outstanding human being. That was your father-in-law.
My ex-father-in-law.
Ex-father-in-law.
Yeah.
Wow. What a beautiful person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, then he's passed that on to generations.
Mm-hmm.
My kids watch that with him. They've watched what I've done with my mom. And, I don't think my kids are going to just throw me to the wolves, someday when when I can't take care of myself anymore, because they see that it's an important value.
Yes. Yes. Oh, Brooke, I've just loved this conversation. It has been, I just hope everybody listens to it because there's so much wisdom in this conversation that we've had, and you've been so enlightening with and open with your story, and people, we learn from stories, and thank you for sharing that one about your ex-father-in-law. I got shivers when you told that story, and I will remember that story now. So I appreciate that from you. Well, Brooke, is there anything that you would like to say in closing to anybody that might be listening? Any last words of wisdom or advice that you would like to share with them?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I hope that in my story it's shown is that it's through the hard things that we grow as a person. Mm-hmm. It's not through the easy times. It's not manifesting the new car or getting lots of money in the bank account. Those are all great things. but it's the moments where you have to make the difficult decisions. It's the moments where you have to step up. It's the moment where you have to maybe put yourself aside for a moment and do what's best for another person, because I believe that's the definition of love, is wanting the best for the other person. And you don't have to want the best for the other person and still even want to be around the other person, right? So that, love is not that way. But anyway, getting back to my point.
Yeah.
It's in doing the hard things that you're going to grow and you're going to be a better person. I, looking back now, can say that I would never have been able to live with myself if I hadn't walked through that with my mom.
Right.
I would have been justified, but.
Yeah, just being justified doesn't make it right. And as you said, it doesn't, it's almost like the bitterness will just be carried to your grave.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's not good in your life either.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But I do want to stress that I was only able to do that because I'd done a lot of healing beforehand.
Yes.
I don't ever suggest to people who have an abusive dynamic with someone, whether they're a parent or not, to go and put yourself in close proximity of that person unless you're healed, unless you're able to have your boundaries, unless you're able to do exactly what you need to preserve yourself. And I already had those things in place. I knew what I was going to do if my mom behaved this way or said these things. I already knew all of that ahead of time.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Well, and I'm glad you brought that point out, because that's so true, that, it also depends on the other person, and if the other person is, you can't go and help someone and just be verbally or emotionally abused every single day. So for sure, you have to have done some work on yourself and done some healing to be able to go and just, let it slide, let it slide to do that. So I agree. I would just like to stress as well that if somebody's listening to this and they couldn't do it, or they didn't do it, we do what we can do at the time at that time. And,
absolutely.
And if we were not able to do it, or we couldn't do it, then so be it. That's the way it was meant to be. So
absolutely,
no judgment, no guilt. We shouldn't be feeling that way, and don't put anything on ourselves at all. For sure.
And Julie, I did have a plan B, understanding how dementia normally develops and that she probably was going to get more obstinate and difficult to deal with. If it had gotten to a point where she was being abusive to me emotionally, I would have had other people come in that I would pay to help me with the day-to-day things. I already knew that.
Yeah.
No, there was no way I would have put myself through that again.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yes. Well, Brooke, thank you so much. Oh my goodness, this was one of my favorite conversations, and I love it when we can get lots of good lessons out for people who are listening, and hopefully we've been able to help the people who have been listening to the podcast or watching this on YouTube. And if anybody wants to know more about Brooke, in the description, we're going to have her little bio, and then there's going to be a way to reach out to her. She does do counseling. So if you wanted to speak to her about anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out. She does coach people. And buy the book. Buy the book. I knew there was something else I needed to say. Buy the book. So the book is called Women Like Me, Reclaiming Our Power. And so Brooke is one of 9 beautiful writers. And now that we've heard more about her story, you can understand what the rest of the book is about. It's all about women reclaiming their power, and just like Brooke did. So thank you, Brooke, for agreeing to write in the book and agreeing to do this with me. And I hope that we get to see you one day soon. And I love Huatulco. So if I ever end up in Huatulco again and you're still there, I will come and have Not tequila, but something with you. I like tequila.
Well, we have coffee plantations here too, so
There you go. I love coffee.
so
I actually love Mexican coffee.
yeah. Well, thank
Yeah.
you, Julie. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I feel very honored to be in one of the books that you've organized because they're phenomenal.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, well, nice to see you. We'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody. Take
Okay.
care.
Bye-bye.